All right, well, we are continuing to build on a theme that we have been working on since January, and that is the theme of faithfulness. What does Christ-like look like in your life? And I hope that you've been tracking along with us. I know you probably haven't been able to make every single week. Each week is sort of interdependent, but I think all of them are important. I have a couple opportunities for you, really one opportunity in a couple forms. I encouraged you last week to start bringing with you a paper Bible to church if you have one, paper and leather, old school, a book. If you don't have one, then we have some Bibles that we have provided for you in the city store. I picked some up here this last week. If you do not have an NIV translation or a copy of the Bible to take with you or bring with you to church, the first is just a little NIV thin line, imitation leather. It's kind of a 9 font, kind of a smaller font. For those of you that don't, if you need reading glasses, you'll need them with this Bible. But just $20, and it's easy to throw in your purse, backpack, your bag, or whatever. Keep with you. I didn't buy very many of them because I don't know how many of you are going to want them, but we can always get more. They're $20. The church breaks even on those. We don't lose any money. We don't make any money, of course. The second opportunity is a little more unusual. I've been sort of tracking these particular Bibles. They are also NIV, goatskin bound, really high quality, the kind of Bible that you could probably have the rest of your life if you wanted to. And I've been kind of watching them. They were $229. They went on sale for $94. And so I only bought 3 of them because I don't know if any of you guys are going to want them. Right now, the price has gone back up to $120 or $117. But there are 3 of these available in the city store. If any of you want something that's really nice that may be with you for a long time, we can pick up more if you would like to. I encourage you to bring with you some paper Bibles. If you don't have one, then we will be more than happy to give you one if you cannot afford one. But it is a great discipline to track along, to circle things that maybe you are wanting to remember. You can write some notes. We've been working on Daniel chapter 1 for the last few weeks, and you can probably see in my Bible, I've made the most of writing in there. I don't normally write this much. I don't even really look at it that much when I'm preaching because it's all in here and here. By the time I step up here, I'm in trouble. But all week long, I'll just add notes to the Bible, things I think are important to remember to tell you. And then there's so much that, telling you everything is really telling you nothing. But we are working on faithfulness. And I wanted to just sort of set the scene or set the tone for you back to the book of Daniel and kind of where we are in that. It's an example of faithfulness. What does Christ-like look like, even though this was many, many years before the life of Jesus? Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego found themselves in a foreign world, and they had to make a choice. I found myself in a foreign world this last week called Walmart, and I had to make a choice. My son, Richard, bought his mama a present, which is always a good idea. If you're a kid, you got a mama, they like presents. Mother's Day's coming up. Her birthday was last month. Richard mailed her a present. It was a popcorn popper, one of which we already have. And so we were going to return it to Walmart. Now, he ordered it on Walmart online. So here's the problem. The plot's thickening. I told Richard, I'm like, hey, there's no reason for us to keep it. I'll go ahead and return it. It'll go back to your card. The gesture, was received. So you basically get a free gesture with mama. She's happy. Your card gets credited, everything's good. And so I said, send me the return label or the return receipt and I'll go ahead and take it back to Walmart. So he sent me the return receipt. I printed it out, took it to Walmart. So I went to customer service. I had the popcorn popper. I had the return receipt. And I said to the lady, really nice lady. She was like a younger, probably 9 years old. Kids are looking so young these days. And she was probably older than 9, but she looked like she was 9 years old. Really sweet girl. And I said, I need to return this. And I handed her my receipt. And she said, oh, I can't return this. She said, you have to take this to FedEx. And I said, well, here's the return label right here. I said, see the QR code? She goes, yeah, but you can't do that because he checked a box that says that he has to mail it back. And I said, yeah, I understand, but there's both receipts right here. Could you just scan it so that I could return it? And she said, no, I'm sorry, you're going to have to take that to FedEx. But there's good news because there's a FedEx that's just 2 doors down in Walmart. And I didn't want to give her a hard time, but I'd been waiting in line and Joy was waiting out in the truck. And so I said, okay, I just want to get this straight. And I know you don't go to the board meetings and make the policies, but I said, do you want me to actually take this thing that's for Walmart and you want me to walk it down to FedEx so that they can mail this to Walmart? And I said, are they just going to walk it right back down to you and charge, the money to ship it? And she looked at me like I'd said enough. It was one of those times where they were going to put me on a list and I'm like, all right, I got it. And so I walked down to FedEx and I asked the lady, I said, what are you going to do with this? And she goes, oh, we're going to mail it to Walmart. And I said, we are in Walmart. And at that point, I realized I could get an aneurysm. I could just keel over. I could start sending strongly worded emails, or I could just realize that I'm in a different world with different rules, that it makes sense to somebody, and just go with it. And that's what Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had to choose to do. They were in a different world with different rules. They had to choose how they were going to act or interact. They'd been kidnapped by King Nebuchadnezzar. Their country had been ransacked. The people from Israel had been dispersed into all the corners of that ancient world. And as you learned from last week, there were a few hand-selected youth out of the group that King Nebuchadnezzar pulled or culled from the crowd. Good-looking, strong, intelligent people who were able to handle themselves, good social graces, and they were pulled out of that group, and there was a goal or a purpose for them. The purpose was to indoctrinate them into the ways of Babylon so that they could contribute to the government, but so that they could basically be brainwashed. And they had to decide, these men. Now, the problem was that Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego weren't men. Now, many people think of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego like they had full beards and, adult men. And in Daniel chapter 6, when Daniel in the lion's den pops up, that was the case. Daniel was probably 80. But in Daniel chapter 1, when this story happens, these boys were about 13 or 14 years old. So they had been pulled from their home into a foreign world. They'd been kidnapped. Their names had been changed to represent names of the gods of Babylon. They were forced to learn a new language. They were put into a school within which they excelled. Mathematics, philosophy, law, astronomy, magic, 12 different subjects. They were out of their depth. Josephus tells us they were involuntarily made eunuchs. And they were in a culture and in a world where they had to decide who they were and how they were going to survive. It's not unlike a 13 or 14-year-old today being pushed out into the world. And you ask yourself the question, am I preparing my kids for this? Or am I so busy protecting or avoiding or, God forbid, blending the two worlds together that they're not going to know the difference, that they're not going to survive? And I've been praying for you guys all week. Our staff has been praying for you all week. And one of the ways that I've been praying for you this week is according to Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 is one of my favorite verses. Today, I'd probably say it's my favorite. I have a different one all the time. But this is how I've been praying for you, because we live in a world that's so difficult to follow Christ. It's so complex, so many decisions, so much going on. So many people have ideas for what your life should be, where you should go, the things you should think. And for you to stay focused, for you to be a person of faith, for you to exhibit what Christ-like looks like, the deck is stacked so against you that you have to have the Holy Spirit's help. You have to have an unbelievable amount of self-discipline and self-awareness, and you have to resolve or determine you are going to live a different way. And the deck is still stacked against you because the Bible tells us that there's the devil outside, that there's the flesh inside, and there's the world around you, and they all will pull you away from the person God has intended for you to be and the one you want to be. And you have to fight against that current so the Holy Spirit can transform you. And Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, I believe, holds the key. Trust in the Lord. In the very first point last week, we talked about Daniel and his life and the decision that he had to make. Did he believe God or simply believe in God? Did he believe that God loved him, that God had a plan for his life, that there was a promise that God had that he was going to keep? Did he live like he believed that God was really in control? Do you live that way? Trust in the Lord, which means that I no longer will trust in myself. And here's the qualifier: with all of my heart. And if I were going to preach this passage to you today or teach, and this was the passage, all, A-L-L, I'd have that in capital letters, and I would probably have an acronym, because that's the focal point. That's the crux. That's the most important word, I think, in this passage. You have to decide who you trust with all your heart. You have to decide what faithfulness looks like in your life. You have to decide what you want the world to see, and the way you do that is you decide who it is you want to be. You trust the Lord with all of your heart. Aren't you tired of living with a divided heart? With one foot in and one foot out? Testing the waters but never fully trusting? It's exhausting and not the life you were created to live. Trust the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know the right decisions to make in my life today half the time. I can't predict the future, but I trust the Lord with all my heart. I don't lean on my own understanding. In all of my ways, there's the word again, acknowledge him. What you want, God, is what I want, so tell me what you want. I'll live a life of faithfulness. And then here's the promise, and he will direct your path. If you could describe the kind of life that I want for myself, for my wife, for my kids, for my daughters-in-law, for my grandkids, for you, it's the directed, let me rephrase that. It's the God-directed path. That's what I want for you. My question is, do you want it for yourself? Now, at the end of the time last week, I asked you guys, I said, I challenge you to take one thing and add it to your life that you think will develop faithfulness. Just one thing. And I told you the story of Baxter, my dog, who pooped on the carpet and got Joy to go to the store at the same time. And Joy, after church, she was like, do you think the people in church are going to think you called him a dog or called him stupid because you talked about pooping on the carpet? And I'm like, I don't know, but that's the way I think about myself. Sometimes we try to do everything, and in turn, we do nothing. Saying everything is saying nothing. Doing everything is doing nothing. That we grab one thing we know to do and we resolve to do it, and you put it in your life and you do it no matter what, and you build a life of faithfulness. Pastor Brandon asked me, he said, how many of our church people do you think are actually going to do this? And I said, I don't know, Brandon, probably 5%. And I said, that's not cynical, it's reality. But think about the 5% and how they're going to grow. And what else do we do besides just continue to teach the word, continue to lay it out there, continue to challenge you, to continue to paint the picture of what a life of faithfulness looks like. And then you have to decide not what you're going to listen to and hear, but what you're going to do when you leave out there. And if I could make the decision for you, I would, but I can't. So I just keep presenting it to you and praying, oh God, let it stick. And that's where we've been today. And that's where we've been last week and the week before. Since January, and I believe in you, and I'm for you, and I love you, and I'm proud of you. And I want you more than anything else to trust the Lord with all your heart, not to lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. So Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego found themselves in the middle of it, in the thick of it. They were in a foreign world, and they had to decide, do we curse the darkness or do we light a candle? There's not one hint of bitterness, resentment, entitlement in the entire first chapter of Daniel. But how much bitterness, resentment, and entitlement do we get in our lives when things happen to us that pale in comparison to what these young men were dealing with? None of it. But they were forced into a world. They were dealt a hand, and they had to choose whether or not they were going to play their hand God's way or their way. And nobody would have blamed them if they jumped ship. Foreign world, kidnapped, forced to learn a different language, name changed, hopes of a family or a wife and children gone. Your future planned out for you by somebody else. All right, we get it. Just go into the tank. Continue to tell the story that broke you. But instead, they began to live the story that was going to rebuild them. And they were children. How in the world do we build a child, a kid, that could withstand something like this? Well, let's pick up together where we left off last week, which is in verse 8. And I just freaked out Sean up there because in the first service I started in verse 1. So I'm trying to move it forward because I got some good stuff to share with you. So we're going to start in verse 8. I'm going to trust you remember 1 through 8 from last week. If not, Read it on your own in your paper Bible that you either own yourself or you bought at the city store or your app if you want to stay digital. But Daniel resolved. Now here's the key. But Daniel resolved, and I shared with you last week that when Daniel resolved that word, that Hebrew word, is the same word for making a rope. That you take the things in your life, you wind them together, and you resolve, you make a decision. Now what he resolved was kind of significant, but translatable into our culture in many ways. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and the wine that was going to be fed to him. The king had said, fatten them up, give them all the best food, all the best wine. But the problem was that the food and wine had been offered to idols. And it was a way for them to worship the idols by offering the food to the idols. And it was symbolic, but then they would eat the food, and it was a way for them to sort of honor the idols. So it was part of their church, their evil, dark church. And so Daniel knew that he couldn't worship another God because he knew that thou shalt have no other gods before me, that you worship the one true God. Plus they ate some of the forbidden food in the Old Testament, pork and different things. And so he knew, and this is the thing, he didn't focus on all the things that he couldn't do. I want you to hear this because this is where we get stuck. Do not focus on all the things you can't do. Do not focus on the way you wish that things were. Do not focus on the way things should be. Don't wait until things straighten up or line out before you take action. This is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. I am the me the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in me. They are the day the Lord has made. I'll rejoice and be glad in them. And it is the Lord has made. I'll rejoice and be glad in it. I'm going to do what I can. Not what I wish I could. Not what I think I should be able to. I'm not going to wait till other people do what they should do. I'm going to do what I can. And that's what these men did, these boys. They resolved. They made a deal. They asked, well, I'll read it to you very quickly and then go back and talk about this process. Now, God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. Remember last week I said, if you want to see who's in control in Daniel chapter 1, you go to verse 3 where it says the Lord was calling the shots. You go right here to verse 8 to see that God was calling the shots, or not verse 9, and you go to verse 17. And you see in these three places that God was in fact calling the shots. Now, God had caused the official to show favor and compassion with Daniel. But before this happened, we see that Daniel asked the chief official. Here's a side note. Daniel went to the authorities. He went to the person who was holding him captive. He went to his boss, and he asked him to change the rules. Now, the word asked in Hebrew is it's a heartfelt, respectful exchange where one is submissive but still passionate, asking for permission, not demanding out of entitlement. I've heard of and I have known and even heard about this week a Christian businessman who said he would no longer hire Christians because having Christians work for him with their sense of entitlement and their demanding grace made it almost impossible for him to be responsible to somebody else and to continue a bottom line because the demands, the entitled grace, the expectation of shifting everything in the workplace to cater to their convictions. He said it just wasn't worth it anymore. But Daniel went into the system and worked within the system with respect, asked for permission to live out a conviction, and God granted him favor to do that. So there's a very different approach that he took than many of us would take in this situation. Not demanding rights, not saying go get boiled beef from Israel or bring in the kosher food that we had. But look, I'll just eat the vegetables and drink the water. That's it. Daniel, the official told Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord the king. He has assigned your food and drink, and why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would cut off my head because of you. Daniel then said to the guard to whom the chief official had appointed over him, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, test us for 10 days, give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink, vegetarian diet, and then see, compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed to this and he tested them for 10 days. Now, I don't want to spoil this story, but they passed the test. But I want to back up to the Daniel resolved, because this is really where the rubber hits the road. Somebody had prepared these children to enter the world, and as the world hit them head on, they had the worldview, the teaching, had seen the demonstrated faith, to where they could weave a rope out of the strands of truth and values that were implanted into their life by their parents and the community around them, that allowed them to live a life of faithfulness. Because kids, just like anybody else, when faced with adversity, they weave their rope. And the strands that they use are the ones that they've seen from you, what they've experienced in their life to date, and the stuff they've determined to be real and valuable are the stuff that they've seen as trite and fake. And I don't know if this is 100% true. It's my research that's backed it up. And I have 34 years of anecdotal research, watching kids and families and parents. But I can tell you that words are cheap. And far too many of us have talked the Christian talk. And we've lived lives when the rubber hits the road that shows that we have 1 foot in the boat, remember 2 weeks ago, and 1 foot in the water. That we want the best of both worlds, so to speak, and we want everything, so we have what? Nothing. When you want your kid to have everything, you give your kid nothing. So we have to decide as parents, as grandparents, as aunts, as uncles, as church members, first of all, what is the rope that we have woven into our lives? And what are the strands that the kids who are watching, what are they going to see? Because when they face their Babylon, that's what's going to determine their resolve. And let me promise you something, they will be resolved to do something. I think that kids oftentimes listen to their moms. Maybe. Now that I have a granddaughter, I'm working on that theory. My boys listen to their mama. But let me tell you what they also did. They watched me. They heard what I said. My words meant nothing unless they saw me back it. Let me tell you how hard that is. Because they're always there. It's like my marriage. It's like, my gosh, the one woman I want to believe that I'm faithful and Christ-like more than anything else in the whole world sees me all the time. The worst days and the best days. But when they see us saying one thing is important but living a different, not representing faithfulness with our time, with our money, with our thoughts, telling them that certain things are important, but they can have everything, living with 1 foot inside the boat, 1 foot in the world. Not only do we confuse them, but we cause them to have a faith that they will do one of two things with. At best, they're going to deconstruct it because they know it's not real. At worst, they're going to copy it and be just like us. And now's the time to intentionally invest the strands that are going to help the kids in our lives, whether they be yours or someone else's. Weave a rope of faithfulness because they can't make the decisions on their own, and you have to have the courage to make them for them, even if they don't like it. Now, we have to make those decisions ourselves and begin to live that way, because an authentic faith, I'll say it again, a genuine faith, an authentic faith is the only faith worth sharing. How many fake people with fake faith do you know? But when you think of someone with a real faith, a humble faith, a broken faith, an authentic faith, a repentant faith, a fractured faith, A transparent faith, that's what I want to see. That's what your kids need to see. That's what prepares them for Babylon. That's what lets them weave a rope of resolve. But they have to be shown what faithfulness looks like. They're not going to learn it on their own. And if you don't put them in a place where that can happen, it's your fault, not theirs. Now, I'm not preaching at you. I'm preaching with you. I have a relative, Christian counselor, and he says, you don't know how your kids are going to turn out until they hit 40. Then when his kids hit 40, he moved it to 50. And my dad, now that I'm in my 50s, is like, we're going to bump that to 60 and we'll see what happens, right? My gosh, parenting is hard. If you have adult kids, I pray for my adult kids every bit as much or more than I did my kids when they were at home. I don't know what they're doing now. I'm proud of them, but my goodness, it's scary, right? You want to make every decision for them, but you can't. So you hope that you have built the strands of faithfulness in their life where they can weave a rope. And when they weave their own rope, well, it doesn't always turn out the way that it should. But if you've done your part, then you know you've parented with faithfulness. By the way, I want to just throw something out here to you. We're going to have, if there's interest, a group, a Bible study on parenting, because it's really tough. And one of the best things we can do is share experiences and talk about that. Most likely be using a curriculum, a book. I'll run over out of screen here sorry, that's the second time today I've walked off camera, but that's okay. Probably using this book, Andy Stanley, his book on parenting, getting it right. He has adult kids and very humble. I mean, my goodness, his approach is we did the very best we could, still wasn't good enough. And, we're holding on loosely, but let me share with you some of the things that we've learned. And if you're interested in that, I'm going to base the time of that and the parameters of that around your interest. And so if you're interested, your responsibility is to either let Pastor Brandon or I know, and then we'll get a group together and do that. We're also thinking about doing one on marriage, which I know I can always use marriage tune-ups. And if that interests you, let me know. I don't want to do things that don't interest you because I don't want to waste my time any more than you want to have your time wasted. But I do want to provide tools for you that are going to allow you to grow. And that's what we're trying to do. So there we go. They have resolved. They were going to do what they can do in spite of the circumstances that they were dealt, and they were going to be faithful. And they had to choose, and the choice they had was an interesting one. Now, this is an interesting choice, and I involved our staff in it this last week. An interesting choice. They had to choose something, and so the way that they chose, or what they chose, was to abstain from something, was to stop something. And I think one of the most powerful things that we can do in our life is to tell ourselves no. Because self-discipline and self-awareness is one of the biggest strands, one of the most strong strands, the most important strands of any rope that we may weave or build ourselves for the resolve of faithfulness and a faithful life. And to tell yourself no, to listen to no, to live no is really, really important. And I learned this as a young man in the very first church that I served. I was a youth pastor, and the pastor invited me to come over to his house. If you've been with me for 9 years, 9.5, you've probably heard this story before, but I've been here for a while and I'm getting old, so I'm just going to repeat them from time to time. But he invited me to come over. His wife made me a sandwich. We were eating in his study, his den. His name was Jay, Dr. Dennis. And his wife brought in sandwiches. We ate. We were having a great conversation. And then she brought in chocolate cake. And when she brought in chocolate cake, she was like, hey, you want some chocolate cake? And I'm like, right on, give me the chocolate cake. And so I took it, and I looked over at Jay, Dr. Dennis, and he said, no, I don't want any cake. Now, Jay didn't look like he shouldn't have cake. He was fit. He played tennis. If that's a sport, I don't know if that's a sport. It's a sport. I was waiting to see if you were listening. That's all. Pickleball, I don't know. Tennis is, yeah. But he played tennis. He was fit, and he didn't eat the cake. And so I'm stuffing my face with this chocolate cake. It was awesome. And at the end of it, I was like, hey, Dr. Dennis, why didn't you have any cake? And he was waiting for me to ask. He was using his pastor mind tricks on me. I don't know that I have that mind tricks now like he had, but man, he got me. He said, let me tell you something. He said, sometimes it's very important to tell yourself no in the little things and listen, because the big things are coming and you're going to have to tell yourself no. And if you've listened and you followed through, it's going to get easier with time. And I don't take many things to heart. I learned the hard way. I'm thick-headed. But I listened to that, because I knew that self-discipline and self-awareness was one of the strands that I had to have to build a life of faithfulness. So from time to time in my life, what I've tried to do is to evaluate things that some people would consider little and cut them out of my life. To tell myself no. Not trivial things, things that I'll miss. But little things become big things over time. And so from time to time, you may have even heard one of these stories. I cut out one of the things that controls me, that you may laugh at, but for me, it's an issue. And it's caffeine. And I can get addicted to caffeine and coffee fast. And I know that I'm a different person when I'm not drinking caffeine to the extent that I drank caffeine 2 weeks ago, and that I really should cut it out for me, not for you. And so in preparation for this part of this message, which I thought was gonna happen last week, now it's this week. If I don't hurry up, it'll be next week too, because we're about out of time. There's a timer behind you guys, and when it turns red, then I know I got to pick the pace up a little. And don't look. No, don't look. Don't look. You guys are looking. So 2 weeks ago, on Monday, I decided that I was going to get rid of caffeine. That I was going to follow along with Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I was going to remove it from my life. I was going to deal with the withdrawal. I was going to deal with the thoughts, with the desire to go and make a cup, drink a cup, whatever. I weaned myself off for 3 days or 4. About the 4th day, Joy asked me, she goes, "Are you quitting caffeine?" I didn't want to tell her because she'd all the time be going, "Are you feeling bad? Are you cranky?" And I didn't, because I was cranky. I was feeling bad. And I'd be like, "Stop talking to me." It would have been really bad. So I just didn't want her to know. She's like, "There's still a full pot of coffee here." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm almost off caffeine." She goes, "Well, then I'm going to quit too." And I said, "For the love of God, don't quit caffeine the same week I am. If you do, one of us is going to Polk County and probably not coming out." And so she didn't yet, but I did. But I quit coffee. And I had some really interesting thought transformations. It reminded me that I had control, that I had willpower, that I could be disciplined. And this is what it reminded me. I could think a different thought. When I wake up in the morning after 4 days, the first thought that I thought wasn't, "I need a cup of coffee." When I started dragging, the first thought that I thought wasn't, "I need a cup of coffee." I could actually provide the space to think a different thought. So I challenged our staff on Tuesday. I dumped it on them. We didn't get to it last week. And so since we had an extra week, I decided to involve them in the experiment. And I said, "All right, guys, this is what I want you to do. Pick something in your life that may not be a huge thing. Might just be a thing, just might be something you do that you'd miss if it wasn't there. But I want you to be disciplined. I want you to tell yourself no. I want you to engage. I want you to grow." And this is what I told them: the church will grow as fast as you are. Now, that was probably, like a pastor mind. I don't know. But I think it's true in a lot of ways. If we're not trying to lead that way, growing with you, then, what good are we? So I said, this is what I want. I want you to tell me what you're going to cut out, what you're going to quit. And I want you to tell me if it's okay for me to share it. And I want you to text me and tell me how the process goes, because I want our church to understand. Now, you may not think this is spiritual, but this is deeply, deeply spiritual. Because you are teaching yourself you can live without things you think you need. You are showing yourself that you can be disciplined and you can change the habits in your life. And little things, friend, become big things over time, and it becomes big things quick. So I laid it out there, and I didn't know what they would do. Brandon was first, and Brandon said, "Okay, I'm in." And I get to confess all of their things to you, which is fun for me. I asked permission. My wife was the only reluctant one, and hers will be last. Brandon's like, "I'm on social media too much." He said, "I always tell myself it's a tool." But he said, "It's too much." He said, "I looked at my social media meter. I'm not going to tell you what he told me about the amount of time that he was watching or using social media, but for him it was too much." And he said, "I'm going to quit." So from midnight on Tuesday until today, he has limited his social media time to where it was useful and a tool, but not a time waster and a mind number. Kelly Cowie chimed in. Kelly's like, "Hey, I'm a little bit ashamed to admit this," but she goes, "I really like Monster energy drinks." And she said, "I love Monster energy drinks in the morning." She said, "It's something I look forward to get my day started." And she said, "I don't know what my day is going to be like without it," but she said, "I'm in. Let's see what happens." Kelly texted the next day and she said, "I think a miracle happened." She said, "God, I think, took away my desire for the Monster." As of today, Kelly has been since Tuesday monster-free. Now, if you're not monster-free, does that mean you're sinning? No. Do we celebrate what she's doing? You better believe it. Danielle Pogansey. Danielle said, I doom scroll. You know what doom scrolling is? She said, when I just sort of get, my mind, I get stressed, I just pick up the phone and I just start, and she goes, I didn't realize how much time I was spending doing that. She goes, I'm gonna stop cold turkey, I'm gonna feel it, I'm gonna work through it, and I'm gonna see what happens. As of today, she has stopped doom scrolling, and what she said is, I have so much more time. Anyway, she can tell you about that. Ashley Van Horn, hers freaked me out the most because she texted it into the group chat that we have. And she said, I don't want to admit this because mine's illegal. And I'm like, yes, I'm in. This is great. Illegal. What's she going to confess? Ashley, our worship leader up here, and I said, Ashley, what in the world would she possibly confess? And she said, I text and use my phone while I drive and it freaks my girls out. She said, I can't control it. She said, I hear the notification ding. I grab my phone and I use it. And she said, I'm used to it. It stresses me out when I don't answer or respond immediately. And she said, I'm going to stop it. I'm going to cut it out. And I was texting in I was so excited for her and congratulating her. And then I went, you know what? I'm driving and I'm on my phone. I'm like, whoa. So, and my sweet wife, Joy. Joy likes to play games on her phone when she gets nervous, when she's stressed out, when she wants to just mind numb and occupy time. She'll just sit there and just flip. And I don't understand it because I don't like games. Anything I don't do is dumb to me, right? But the stuff I do makes sense. That's the way it works, right? And then Joy said, and I'm not like, Joy, you have to do that. We don't have that kind of relationship. She does what she wants to do. She's supportive, part of our staff. She was in. She said, I'm going to stop playing games on my phone. I can tell you twice this week, she almost fell off the wagon. Almost. Because we were sitting there and she's like, I can just play a little game, right? And I'm like, that's between you and Jesus, babe. If you want to follow up, and so are you not at all since Tuesday? Look at that. Since Tuesday, no games on your phone. Do you play games on your phone? Is it a sin? I'm not telling you it's a sin. What I'm telling you is I'm challenging you, pick something in your life, cut it out, stick to it, to show yourself that you have control, to show yourself you have self-awareness. Little things become big things over time. When you tell yourself no, you listen to no, and then when Babylon happens, you're ready. Some of the things you need to cut out are big things. Some of you drink too much. Ephesians 5 says, don't be drunk with wine, but be filled with the Spirit. I'm not anti-alcohol. I'm anti-drunkenness. But what concerns me the most about alcohol, and there are three things that we lie to ourselves about, and this is research-based. People lie to themselves about three things more than anything else: how much they drink, how much they eat and why, and how much or little they exercise. And when we drink, we remove ourselves from usefulness. We're unavailable to the people around us. We cannot respond to a need. Our minds oftentimes aren't sharp because the purpose is to dull the senses, so that we even take the time and the energy as we disconnect that potentially could have been used to connect with a person or, God forbid, him. Sometimes it's an obvious thing, a health-damaging thing. Sometimes an addiction where you need resolve, the Holy Spirit's help, and potentially some professional help. Maybe you've tried for a long time to quit something in your life and you failed. But if it's the right goal, for the right reason, with the Lord's help, to honor him and not yourself, willing to use the tools that are available to you, even if it means getting help from somebody else, God will help you succeed. Little things become big things over time. So in your life right now, you have a choice if you want to build these strands of faithfulness. Are you willing to do what you can do and not focus on what you can't? Are you willing to stop lying to yourself? I can quit. I believe you. Do you believe you? I can quit. Prove it to yourself, not to me. I'm cheering for you. And when you quit, I don't consider 3 to 5 days quitting. For me, it's 3 months. You may have a different set of criteria. This week, my challenge to you is, what is it you're going to take in your life, whether it be a little thing like caffeine, an energy drink, doom scrolling, a game on your phone, or an addiction that's impairing your life? What are you going to eliminate? What are you going to change? Here's what our staff shared with me. They had more confidence in themselves. They had a sense of pride for eliminating some things that they thought would be tough to eliminate. They had more time in their day. And as they had more space to think, they found themselves thinking the things that they wanted to be thinking in the first place. We've tried it, and we see it working. So I challenge you to try it also. Here's the deal. I share a lot of my life with you guys, probably way too much. I talk to you about my bonsai tree. I talk to you about some of the things that I try to do to grow. And, lots of times, people will say, well, I don't like your plan, Rick. And I'm like, that's fine. You don't have to like my plan. It's not the best plan in the world. It's just mine. And I share it with you because I want you to know I'm trying just like you are. This is hard for me just like it is for you. But what I'll ask you is, what's your plan? And you'll say, well, I don't have one. And then I will say, my plan is much better than yours. So I challenge you. Give it a shot. Last week, you added something to your life. This week, you're going to take something away from your life. And as we work through Daniel chapter 1, and eventually and hopefully quickly get to Daniel chapter 6, I promise you, you're going to see transformation. God will change you into a new person by rearranging the way you think. Father, thank you for my friends. And I pray that as we wrap today up, I have no idea where this message landed and how it hit. I know it's hit me, it's hit our staff in a very powerful way. And as we pray for each other, for our church family, I thank you that it's not an us and them, Father, but that we together, our leadership, our congregation, sit under your authority with humility, asking you to help us grow. We only succeed when all of us succeed. Any plan is better than no plan, Father. And as I'm praying this, I'm reminded and a little saddened with the reality that I can't make anybody do anything. So I offer it out, Father, with the inspiration and the application through your inspired word. And I ask you to make it stick. That this be the day that things start to change. That they would resolve to live a life of faithfulness. Decisions are best made in advance. Character is built by choices. Choices happen now. I thank you, Father, for what you're doing. I pray for my friends, and I love them. In Jesus' name, amen.